Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories.
Dark stairs. The night shift at the mall wasn't what I had signed up for, but that was years ago. Now, it felt like a second skin. I sat in the little security office, staring at the flickering screens that showed the empty hallways, the dark corners, the strange stillness that seemed to consume the place after hours. It was a big shopping center, the kind with everything under one roof: clothing stores, electronics, food courts, and even a couple of arcades. But at night, it wasn't the buzz of human activity that kept me awake. It was the silence. The eerie kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. One of the cameras in the back hallway kept glitching. It wasn't a major issue, just a little static here and there, but it was enough to catch my attention. Every night, the screen would fuzz over just before the camera hit a certain spot, near the emergency exit. It wasn't like the other areas of the mall. No lights, no shiny floors, just a dim, narrow passage leading to a forgotten stairwell. The kind of place people never bother to go unless they're running away from something. Maybe it was the ghost of some old contractor who didn't want his work seen, or maybe it was just the old equipment. But tonight, for some reason, the flickering felt different. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining things, but the screen was still showing the same spot, the same burst of static. It wasn't a glitch. Something was interfering with the feed. Not just a random glitch, but something heavy, an anomaly. Something out of place. I leaned forward, staring at the monitor, my fingers pressing against the cold desk. There was something about the shadow in the corner that didn't sit right. A shape. Like it wasn't part of the wall. I shifted in my chair, the old leather squeaking under my weight. The air in the office was stale, thick with the smell of dust and stale coffee. My shift was dragging, the kind of long, endless night where you start to question everything, even if it's just the hum of the fluorescent lights above you. The screens blinked again, showing the stairwell, then nothing. I'd seen enough of this spot to know that something about it never quite added up. Something about those emergency stairs was off. I ran a hand through my hair, standing up, my boots clanking lightly on the tiled floor as I walked toward the small, forgotten hallway where the glitch kept happening. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the empty space, amplifying the weirdness of it all. When I got close, I could feel the shift in the air. The temperature was cooler here, almost like the building itself had exhaled, letting out a breath it had been holding for years. The exit sign above the door buzzed faintly, and I could see the edge of the stairs, barely illuminated by the distant light at the end of the hallway. I knew I should just let it go. After all, it was probably nothing more than a technical glitch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn in, like something was pulling at me from the shadows. I pushed the door open. The stairs were steep, narrow, and cold. The kind of stairs no one would use unless they had to, tucked away behind the mall's functional areas. I looked up, but the light was too far away to give me any real clarity. Just shadows playing tricks. I could feel my heartbeat quicken as I stepped onto the bottom stair, the wood creaking underfoot. The quiet seemed heavier now, like I was intruding on something that didn't want to be disturbed. The dim emergency lights flickered above me as I crept further into the stairwell, the air thick with the smell of mold and old, forgotten things. As I reached the first landing, something caught my eye, something on the floor near the edge of the stairwell. I couldn't quite make it out at first, but the closer I got, the clearer it became. A shadow, almost indistinguishable from the floor, lay there. My mind raced as I stepped closer, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand as I leaned in. It was an old hatch, one of those emergency access points that had been sealed off years ago. The kind of thing no one ever really noticed. But why had I never seen this before? I bent down, inspecting the edges, my fingers brushing against the rusty metal. Something felt wrong, like it didn't belong here. The moment my hand touched the cold steel, a chill ran down my spine. The quiet was unbearable now. I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the hatch had been here all along. but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. I pulled the latch, the old metal grinding against itself as I tugged. A small squeak echoed in the silence, and then, finally, a crack. The hatch popped open. And below me? Darkness. No floor, no bottom, just a void that swallowed everything. The flashlight flickered weakly in my hand, casting shadows that only seemed to deepen the pit. It wasn't just a hole, it was a black emptiness. A gaping wound in the world. I froze. Then, as if on cue, I felt it. Something moving from the dark. Cold. Deliberate. It reached up from the abyss, skeletal fingers, sharp and white, crawling toward me. I couldn't breathe. My body froze. Just as the first of the fingers touched the edge of the hatch, I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest. I fell, scrambling to get away, my mind racing, telling me to run, to get out, to leave before whatever it was had a chance to pull me in. I didn't stick around to see what came next. I slammed the door shut behind me and bolted, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop running. I had to get out of that place. And yet, even as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just opened something I wasn't meant to see. And whatever was down there wasn't done with me yet. The air felt thicker now, almost oppressive, as I stumbled back through the corridors of the mall, my mind spinning in a haze of adrenaline and disbelief. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the quiet, amplifying the sense of something else, something unseen, following behind me. I had to keep moving, keep my head down, but each glance back felt heavier than the last. Something had been there, something in that black hole below the hatch. I could still see the skeletal fingers, the way they seemed to reach toward me, like a warning, like a promise. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to acknowledge that whatever that thing was, it wasn't just some trick of my mind or a malfunction of the cameras. I had felt it, the coldness, the pressure, the unnatural pull from the abyss. It was real, and it wasn't going to let me forget. I tried to shake the feeling, to convince myself it was just the darkness playing tricks on me, but it wasn't working. The elevator pinged behind me as I walked, and I froze, my heart racing. The sound was too loud in the silence, and for a brief, maddening moment, I thought I heard the faintest whisper, a voice, too low to understand, but enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. The only thing I could hear now was my breathing, too fast, too shallow. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been this scared. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the thoughts wouldn't stop. What was down there in that hole? Why hadn't I noticed it before? I'd worked these night shifts for years, and I was sure I had seen every inch of this mall, every corner, every stairwell. Yet that hatch, hidden under the stairs, was something I couldn't explain. Why now? Why had it only revealed itself tonight? My mind churned with questions, with doubts. But there was one question that loomed larger than the others. What the hell were those fingers? I made my way back to the security office, every step feeling like I was walking deeper into the unknown. The door swung open with a creak, and I stepped inside, my eyes immediately going to the row of monitors. The screens were still showing empty hallways, vacant stores, nothing unusual. But something felt different now. The atmosphere in the office had changed, thickened, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting. The flickering monitor caught my eye again, the one by the emergency stairs. It was static for a moment, and then, there it was again, the shape. It was back. I couldn't believe it. I had left that area, closed the door, bolted it shut. How could this be happening? The camera feed was glitching, the same as before, but this time there was more than just static. It was like something was moving just beyond the lens. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The image wavered again, and then I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows of the stairwell. Tall, unnaturally still, as if it was waiting for something, or someone. I didn't even realize I was standing until my legs started to ache, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The figure remained, standing motionless, except for the faint, slow flicker of its outline in the dark. It was wearing something, but the details were impossible to make out. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else entirely. My pulse pounded in my throat. I wanted to leave, wanted to shut off the monitors and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. The need to know what was going on here, what I had unleashed, was overpowering. I grabbed the radio and spoke into it, my voice sounding strangely distant, even to myself. "Hey, anyone out there? Is anyone still here?" There was no response, just static. That was when I noticed it. The flickering on the screen wasn't random. It wasn't malfunctioning equipment. It was deliberate. Something was manipulating it, as if trying to get my attention, trying to show me something I didn't want to see. And then the figure moved. Just a small shift, but enough to make my blood run cold. I leaned in closer, straining my eyes, as the figure stepped forward, into the dim light at the edge of the stairwell. I could see it now. Its shape was wrong. It was too tall, too thin. It moved like a puppet on strings, jerking in a way that no human body could. My breath caught in my throat. The thing was real. And it was getting closer. I was on the verge of turning away, of bolting from the room, when I saw something even more disturbing. On the screen, just to the left of the figure, a new shape appeared. Something darker. Something not quite human. Its fingers were long, too long, and they curled around the edges of the doorframe at the bottom of the stairs, like they were waiting to grip something, or someone. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The shape in the stairwell was no longer just a shadow. It was real. And it was coming for me. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear, but I could feel the temperature in the room drop. The flickering monitor seemed to pulse with some strange energy, as if whatever was down there was now aware of me, aware of my presence in the office. My hands shook as I reached for the door, but the moment I touched the handle, the lights in the security room went out, plunging me into complete darkness. The radio crackled to life, the only sound in the room, but all I could hear was static, like the world itself was closing in on me. Then, in the distance, I heard something else, a slow, deliberate scrape. Something moving across the floor, something heavy. Something coming toward me. And then, through the static, a voice. A whisper. "Come back." It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the radio. It wasn't the darkness. It was real. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my chest as the whisper echoed through the silence of the room. My hands were cold, slick with sweat, as I fumbled for the door handle. It felt like an eternity before I finally managed to get a grip, and I wrenched it open, rushing into the hallway outside the security office. The lights above flickered on and off in a chaotic rhythm, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls like twisted figures. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something sharp and metallic, like blood. The entire place felt off, as if it were breathing, alive in a way that wasn't natural. I didn't stop to think. My legs moved on their own, carrying me down the hallway, past the now silent elevators, toward the emergency stairwell. Each step felt heavier, like I was walking through thick mud, the weight of whatever was stalking me pressing down on my shoulders. Every now and then, I could hear that scraping sound again, just faintly, a noise that seemed to be getting closer with every passing second. I tried not to turn around. I tried not to look back at the growing darkness behind me, at the thing I knew was there, waiting. When I reached the stairs, I didn't hesitate. The hatch was still there, now visible under the dim emergency lights. I could feel the pull of it, like gravity itself was urging me toward it. I glanced at the monitor again, though I regretted it immediately. There, standing just at the edge of the stairwell, was the figure. It hadn't moved, but I knew it was aware of me, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Its eyes, if you could call them that, glowed with an unnatural light, the same sickly green hue that stained the darkness. I could almost feel it staring at me through the screen, like it was trying to get into my head, trying to make me understand something I wasn't meant to. I could hear it now. Not just the scraping, but something else. a low, gurgling sound that seemed to come from deep within the stairwell itself. It was a sound I had never heard before, something primal and raw, and it made my stomach churn. I stood frozen at the base of the stairs, my fingers digging into the railing as if it could anchor me, as if it could somehow keep me grounded. But I knew it was pointless. Nothing was going to stop this. The black hole in the floor called to me. It seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, breathing in the dark. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to go down there. I didn't want to open that hatch and face whatever waited in the dark. But I had no choice. I couldn't leave it unchecked. Not now, not when I knew it was there. With trembling hands, I knelt down, pulling at the old latch. It was stuck at first, and I almost gave up, but then the latch gave way with a reluctant click, and the heavy metal door creaked open. The blackness below was absolute, as if the very fabric of reality was twisted into something wrong. It swallowed the light, consumed it entirely. I peered down, but I couldn't see anything beyond the first few feet, the darkness too thick to make out any details. And then I heard it. The sound of movement from below, scraping and shifting, like something large and heavy was slowly rising from the pit. My heart seemed to stop, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. My body was frozen, my mind too scrambled to process what was happening. But I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't alone. The fingers, those long, skeletal fingers, emerged first, slowly, deliberately, curling around the edge of the hole. They were thin, too thin, stretched like they had been pulled too far from their source. There was a sound, a sickening crack, like bones bending in ways they shouldn't, as the hand rose higher. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. But the fingers weren't the worst part. No, the worst part was the shape that followed them. It rose from the abyss, tall and slender, its body too tall for the space, too wide to be human. The skin was slick, black, and stretched tight over a skeletal frame, the flesh glistening like it had been dipped in oil. Its head tilted unnaturally, a sharp crack echoing from its neck as it moved. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in a low, guttural sound, a series of growls and clicks that made my teeth ache. The voice was ancient, almost beyond comprehension, but somehow I understood it. It wanted me. It needed me. I could feel it in my bones, in the marrow, the chill creeping up my spine like an ice-cold hand. The thing's eyes glinted, hollow and black, devoid of anything human. Its fingers reached toward me, closer and closer, and I knew if I stayed there any longer, it would take me, pull me down into that blackness where it came from. I snapped out of my trance and bolted up the stairs, my legs screaming in protest. The sound of the thing following me, its clicking steps echoing in the stairwell, made my heart pound in terror. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. But I could hear it getting closer, the air growing colder with each step. The door to the roof was just ahead, and I pushed it open with all my strength, stumbling out into the night air. The cold hit me like a slap, the wind rushing against my face. I didn't stop. I kept running, kept moving, until my legs felt like they would collapse beneath me. I didn't look back, not even when I heard the scrape of something heavy dragging across the ground. I didn't stop until I was out of the building and into the parking lot, gasping for air, the dark stairwell and its horrors far behind me. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling. That feeling of eyes watching me, of something waiting in the dark, biding its time. The thing from the stairs wasn't gone. It was still out there, somewhere. And one day, it would come for me. I just didn't know when. I couldn't shake the feeling. Even as I stood there in the parking lot, the cool night air biting at my skin, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling, I knew deep down that this wasn't over. There was no safety in the open air. No protection. My eyes scanned the empty space around me, every shadow stretching too long, every corner too dark. It wasn't just the thing in the stairwell that I feared anymore, it was the way it had followed me, how it had made its presence known, how it had seemed to slip into the very fabric of the place, of my own reality. I thought about calling the police. I thought about telling someone, anyone, about what I had seen, what I had felt, but the words caught in my throat. What would I say? How could I explain the impossible? The last thing I wanted was to be labeled as crazy. No, there was no one who would believe me. And even if they did, what could they do? What could anyone do against something like that? My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement at the edge of the parking lot. At first, I thought it was a car passing by, but then I saw it, a shadow. A figure, tall and thin, standing still in the darkness, watching me. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't help but feel that the world had narrowed, the reality around me warping into something darker. My first instinct was to run, but my legs felt heavy, like they were rooted to the ground. I couldn't move. The figure didn't move either. It stood there, just out of the reach of the parking lot lights, like it was waiting for me to make the first move. And in that silence, I could hear it again, those scraping sounds, distant but unmistakable, echoing through the stillness of the night. I finally found my legs, my body responding to the fight-or-flight instinct coursing through me. I turned on my heel and started walking, slowly at first, then faster as I realized the figure was still there, moving just behind me. It was like it was toying with me, playing some twisted game of cat and mouse, but this wasn't a game. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I could feel the cold sweat soaking through my clothes. The figure followed at a distance, never coming closer, but always there, just within the shadows. I reached the entrance of the building, hands trembling as I fumbled for my keys. I couldn't unlock the door fast enough. The seconds stretched on, each one more excruciating than the last. Finally, the door clicked open, and I rushed inside, slamming it shut behind me. My chest was tight, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps, but at least I was inside. At least I was safe. Or so I thought. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to collect myself. My mind was racing, spinning in every direction. How could something like that be real? How could something so unnatural exist? But I couldn't deny what I had seen, what I had felt. And the worst part? I had the overwhelming sense that whatever it was wasn't done with me yet. It wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. As I stood there in the silence, I couldn't help but think back to the dark stairwell, to the hatch I had opened. What if that had been the wrong thing to do? What if I had unleashed something that had been waiting down there for God knows how long? The more I thought about it, the more I felt a cold weight in the pit of my stomach. I had been so focused on the thing in the dark that I hadn't stopped to consider what else might be hidden beneath the surface. The buzzing of the security monitors cut through the silence, and I jumped, startled. The screens flickered to life again, showing the usual views of the mall. But this time, something was different. Something had changed. The feed from the emergency stairwell was active. It wasn't just static anymore. There, on the screen, I saw it, the same shadowy figure, standing just at the base of the stairs, its form barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. It was like it was waiting for me, just as it had done outside. I rushed to the monitors, my fingers trembling as I zoomed in on the image. It wasn't just the figure that caught my attention. There, in the corner of the screen, was the hatch, open. The blackness beneath it seemed to pulse, to breathe, like something was rising from the depths. And as I watched, I could have sworn I saw something move within the darkness, something reaching up, something trying to escape. I backed away from the monitors, my chest tight with panic. I couldn't take it anymore. The darkness had already taken hold. It had already seeped into the very walls of the building, into the screens, into my mind. I had to leave. I had to get out of there, out of that cursed place. But as I turned to leave, the faintest whisper echoed in my ears, just barely audible, but clear enough to freeze me in my tracks. It was my name. I spun around, my heart racing, my breath shallow. But there was nothing there. No one. Just the empty, cold hallways of the mall, stretching out before me, endless and dark. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. The thing from the stairs, whatever it was, wasn't done. It wasn't finished with me. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. Because I knew, deep down, that if I looked back, I might never escape. My legs ached from the speed, and I couldn't even clearly understand where I was running. I didn't care where I was, I just wanted to leave that place. Everything inside me, like a body trembling from pain, pushed me forward. I couldn't feel myself moving. I was just a crowd in the dark, unable to stop. And then, silence. Nothing. There were no sounds. No footsteps behind me, no overwhelming heaviness in the air that had been torturing me moments ago. I froze. My breath caught. Somewhere deep in my chest, that feeling rose again, that something was waiting for me. I looked around. And then I saw it. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something much bigger, and I already knew it couldn't be a real, living creature. It stood there, just a few steps from me. And it didn't move. It just hung in the air, as if it were tearing through the very fabric of reality, pulling everything back into its emptiness. Again, it became palpable, even if unspoken. It wasn't just a shadow. It was the void itself, waiting to swallow everything. I saw in its darkness shapeless bodies swaying, their skins empty, their eyes not looking, but I felt they saw everything. I wanted to scream, but my lips wouldn't move. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Again, I felt that sensation clutching my heart, leaving it breathless. The shadow began to move. Barely, slowly, like water filling a crack in stone. It was coming closer to me. And that's when I realized, it wasn't just emptiness. It was a path. An entrance to something that had existed there, in the darkness beneath us, from the moment this center was built. I had no choice. I plunged into the darkness, without looking back. It didn't leave me, that force. So I ran. And I ran as fast as I could. I was lost, no longer existing in reality. And suddenly, darkness consumed me. And again, I heard only a whisper, my name, echoing in the void.